What up, NBA boy?
Mm,
We're
mm,
back.
mm, mm.
We've
It's
been
been a
gone
minute.
for a bit, but we're back. Um, we're gonna do contenders or pretenders, Western Conference style. Um, any surprises so far in this Western Conference? I mean, I know Denver at the top is probably not the biggest surprise, but
I know one team that I root for really hard that might be a shocker.
No, I was gonna start there too, so go for it.
Um, I don't believe us to be a number four seed the whole season. Like that's ridiculous. But I wasn't convinced when the season started, but I'm really convinced now. At the very least, Houston's a playing team.
Hmm.
I think we're 8 or 9, something like that. Regardless, you're a playing team. Um, but they just play good basketball now. It's night and day of what we were the past 2 years. Like that's a real basketball team that does real basketball stuff, and I think it's good enough to get us to a playing game. So I don't know if that makes us a pretender per se, but we're just not contending to the level we are right now by season's end.
Here are my two counterpoints. I picked Houston to do well this year, but you've only played two road games.
Mm-hmm.
How's that possible? I mean, it's not Houston's fault. It's just weird scheduling that they've only played two road games,
we
lost both of them. So I want to see how they do once they go on a long road trip. That's different. You're not coming from your home. You're all these young guys. That will change things. And I'm a little worried. Every year there's like a Utah Jazz last year. Started out at 10-2, whatever, 9-3. Is that the Rockets this year? We'll see. I agree. I think they're a playing team as well. But it's going to be hard to sustain that just with how deep the West is and once they really start hitting the road. And some of these bottom Western teams are going to start playing better, but you guys are so talented, though. I'd be shocked if they dropped out of the top 10. I think I
Oh,
agree.
for sure. Counterpoint to your counterpoint. I get where logic says about the scheduling, about the road trip. I don't worry about that because I'm more worried now with all these home games, or like we literally haven't played in 5 days. Like there's so many days in between our games. Like that worries me more than going to play back to back in Cali. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't worry about that. And the reason that I'm banking that we're gonna do well this season is because I think we're number 7 in 3 point percentage, but we're like number 20 in attempts. So like do what you do good a little bit more, and they should hold us.
yeah. Um, a team that I want to bring up for y'all, and this is another surprise because I know for sure I didn't have this team that high. The Minnesota Timberwolves are 8-3 so
Hmm.
far.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
They're currently third behind the Mavericks and the Nuggets. Do you see them sustaining that, or
I feel like they're gonna follow the same. They'll be in the same boat with Houston at the season's end. We'll all be in a playing game.
I I'm higher on them. I picked them to go over their win total this year. One, Anthony Edwards doing the Team USA leap that we've seen from other stars in the past, and two, I was like, I think last year is the worst we saw of the Gobert Towns pairing. Not that it can't get worse, but I think that was just getting all that shit out of the way. And I think Finch is a good enough coach, and they're a talented enough team that I think they're going to be frisky in the West. I don't think they're going to finish wherever they are now, third. But I think this is a playoff team. I think they're a sixth seed.
I agree with you, and the worst part of that pairing is gone behind us. That team has already adopted a little bit of the Rudy Gobert defensive identity. I believe they're top 5 in rebounding and top 5 in total defense, which that's like an influencer. That team is still bad on offense, though.
Hmm.
It's like you literally had to go to a game-winning shot against a Golden State team that had nobody on it that night. Hey, they really do still have a problem scoring. And I think if that team slides, this might be a hot take. If that team slides in any way, Carl Anthony Towns gets traded.
Hmm. Well,
I, I would aggressively be looking for that trade if I'm
that's the
Minnesota.
problem with having Gobert is you get a top five defense, but it's not like Brooke Lopez where you can funnel guys to him and you can hit a three. Gobert can't do shit on offense. We've made fun of that for years now, where he tries to do like the Giannis Euros or whatever else, and he falls on his face, and he clogs up the paint too. where when you have a guy who's explosive like Ant, that doesn't
Hmm.
help having this big plotting big in the way. You could do the pick and roll, but I agree. It's going to be hard for them to ever be a top 5 offense with Rudy Gobert on your team. I don't.
I think Big Cat is the problem, in my opinion. Like, I just look at that team and I was like, I could see a path to rebuilding with Ant and Gobert because it's obvious to me that Ant is the big dog on that team. Now let's get the old one who thought he was away and see if I can recoup some draft picks. And I don't think it's kind of hard to replace the production that Big Cat gives you offensively.
If they were a smart franchise, which evidence has shown that they're not the smartest, they would wait until they made. Let's say they win 5 of their next 6. They're sitting at second in the West. Everything's flowing. That's when you trade Cat when his value's high. Maybe not this early in the season, but if you wait till you hit that 2 wins in 10 game stretch in January, no one's going
Hmm.
to want to trade for him. I mean, not no one, but you're not going to get as much trade value. But teams will never do that. They never sell high because you're winning, you're selling
Yep.
tickets, everyone's talking about you, and if you sold, it'd be pointing fingers everywhere, and it would be a shit show. But you're not going to get what you think you deserve from Cat until you start ripping some wins off consistently, and he starts playing more consistent as well.
I believe there to be a market for him. Also, that's why I would. I think he should be traded. Um, Nuggets number one seed. They're the top of the food chain to me. Like, that's
Yeah,
just a real team. I still believe them to make a trade somehow for a bench player, but that team, that's just a real basketball team. Everything's done the right way. I
yeah,
love watching them play.
We'll give him back Jeff Green at the end of the year. That's fine.
yeah. Contenders find ways to make those margin trades all the time, so don't be surprised.
Yeah, well, I just feel like you have like the Brown kid or whatever, and maybe they're not stepping up like they thought they were to replace like the other
Oh,
Brown. So I just feel like they'll get them a bench player from somewhere and make another playoff run.
saying something else. I always want to call him Braun because it's how it's freaking spelled like Ryan Braun. But the second team in the West right now, I thought they'd be better than their horrific ending last year, but I didn't think they'd be this good, the Mavericks.
Yes.
I
I
mean,
believe them to be at season's end 5 or 6 seed, like competing for that spot. I don't think they're a home court team. Their defense isn't good enough.
I think that's their ceiling. I think their ceiling's a 4 seed, which would
Yeah,
barely be a home team. But I agree, their defense isn't good enough. You can't ride 2 guys 30 points a game and expect that to sustain, no matter how good they are. There, this feels, and I know it's built completely different, but it feels a little bit like those Raptors, Lowry DeRozan teams that would win 50 games, and then in the playoffs they just didn't have enough. And those teams had better defense. The comparison is it just feels like empty calories that they're winning these games.
yes.
Lucas
It
scoring
feels like like how the Bucks were before they won a championship.
oh, oh,
No, they were so good in the regular season. Like they were dominant. You know what I'm saying? Like you couldn't figure them out. And then they win.
yeah, okay.
Uh,
Jason Kidd's their coach. Shit, damn it.
looking at like 5 through about 8 and 9, you got Thunder, Kings, Warriors, Lakers, Suns. I mean, you can throw the Pelicans and Clippers in those. There's like a mixing pot of teams that are struggling. They're getting with injuries. Out of those teams, is there any
I think
contender that you see?
it's hard for me to say that the Thunder are a contender, like a legitimate title contender, because they're not playing the greatest.
Not yet.
But that team is legit.
Yeah.
That team is legit. The problem with them is they don't always play with balls. Like they're not a dog, but when they are, they're hard to beat. That is a real team. So if they find the proper rotations on that team to sustain the season, OKC will be a top 3 seed.
They're good enough to win a playoff series, maybe 2, which would be a huge accomplishment. That's how
Mm-hmm.
good and how high on them I am. But then you have a team like the Clippers who have hit not rock bottom, but lost 6 straight since they got Harden. I'm higher on them as a playoff team because in the playoffs we have Paul George if healthy, which is who knows with the Clippers, but you have Paul George, Kawhi, whatever's, and you don't have to count on James Harden with those two guys. I think they're going to figure it out because they have to. They're locked in. They
Mm-hmm.
have no assets. So I think the Clippers are going to rise up and take one of these spots. There might be a play-in team, but there's so much season left that I'd be surprised. And I don't know about y'all, but when the Kings were 2-4, I was thinking, yeah, what now? What now,
Yeah, I
Kings?
don't think I think that team's sniffing play-in game also. Like I don't think that like record-wise they're going to be anything that they were last year.
I think teams have figured out their shtick. It's
Yes,
high,
and I
high
don't.
pace.
Doesn't it feel like by bringing back Harrison Barnes and that kind of shit, they didn't get better. They didn't. I don't feel like you got better. You're running back. You paid to run back what you had.
Light the
Yeah,
beam.
they did what Chicago did. The difference is they're better than Chicago, but neither of those teams are title contenders. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
not a title contender and you have all this cap space, why would you lock it up with Harrison Barnes? That's what didn't make sense. Nothing against Harrison Barnes. He's a good veteran presence in that locker room. But you're not going to take that next step that many teams take by keeping Barnes and signing this EuroLeague guy. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Kings, fall to the play-in.
I am a little bit higher on the Golden State Warriors than most. Like I don't know that they're a contender. I just fail to believe that they're that bad. Like their defense and their offensive rebounding is still like pretty elite. But considering that they're shooting the ball as bad as I ever seen the Splash Brothers shoot, and they're still in a position to like get better, I'm high on them because eventually they're going to start making shots.
It almost feels like this is might be their last run as a core, just with how things are looking. I know they have guys resigned, but you can't keep this core going forever. It feels like maybe next year, but these are the last 2 years. I think they have a legitimate title shot.
Andrew Wiggins is the factor on that team. If he shows up and plays even like close to what he did on that championship run, this team
Yeah.
is so good. But he's just not there. And I cannot afford for Andrew Wiggins to not be playing elite defense and rebounding when Chris Paul's on the floor. It just doesn't work. No disrespect to Chris Paul, but he's like 39. I don't know. He's old.
Yeah,
And then between the Lakers and the Suns,
Mhm.
I wouldn't be surprised if we see a 10-game winning streak or a nice streak coming from the Lakers. I really like their offseason. They got deeper. They're
Mm-hmm.
going to be a playoff team, so expect a run coming here soon. The Suns, on the other hand, I'm not saying they're not a playoff team with the talent they have, but that is a thin team relying on some aging one-dimensional players. Where
Mm-hmm.
in the East, people say that about the Bucks relying too much on Dame and Giannis now, which is there's some truth to that. But Giannis is still in his prime. Dame is a little bit older too, but Giannis is a two-way player. Where you have Durant, who's not a bad defender, but he's what 36, however old he is, and respect to his offensive game is going to age very well. There's nothing that's going to
Like
go away.
that
Yeah,
team just needs a real. They need a point guard. I
yeah,
know that they say that
yeah.
Devin Booker and Bradley Beal can do it, and they can. I'm not saying that they, but it's just not what you do. They need a real point guard on that team.
Yeah. How are you guys feeling about the Pelicans with the course? It sucks the CJ McCollum stuff. He's not gonna
I
be able
believe that to be the first team to start making trades in the middle of the season.
Oh, blow it up.
Brandon Ingram.
I don't know. That's exactly what I was about to say. Like Ingram and Zion on the court together is just not. It don't work. It does not work. You can't have two people trying to operate the same part of the court. It just doesn't work. And I think there's value for Ingram. So I believe that they might try to trade him.
Every offseason, I fall for this stupid team. Every offseason, I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
this is the year this talent comes together. But now you have Zion saying shit again about his role. And, McCollum with his collapsed lung. And you have all this off-the-court shit that affects this team every year that maybe it just won't work out. This happens in the NBA all the time. There's these teams and runs that just never come to fruition. And I think you might be right. This might be the team. And just like we were talking about Cat earlier, you got to sell before their value tanks. Because if they lose a bunch of games and they're in the bottom of the West, like your trade value
If
is the same.
you're if you're them though, do you trade Zion or do you try to trade something else off that team? Because I think if you trade Zion and keep that team intact, then you could probably add another piece there to help it.
Zion's ceiling is higher than anyone on that team,
Mm-hmm.
but his floor is lower, and he could drag you through that floor with all the baggage. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the risk you want to take. And I think if you're the GM, who knows if this doesn't work, you're getting fired anyway. I think you
Mm-hmm.
risk it, Zion, because that's your best. That's your best bet to do something real in the playoffs if he ever puts it together and stays healthy and off the internet.
But what if you get good assets in return?
What assets? If they didn't want to trade him for Scoot, I don't know what they want to trade him for.
That's true.
That's a trade we all liked that we thought made sense.
Say for instance, you get on the phone. Ah, fuck! I don't want to say this. You get on the phone with Toronto, and you're like, "I'll give you Zion, and I want Pascal and like something." You know what I mean?
Masai would do that. I think so. He's ballsy.
100%, because it frees up money to keep OG. You got Scotty Barnes, and you got Schroeder, so you have you have 4 starters already. So that's why I'm saying Toronto would do that as long as they're not giving up 5 picks with it. You know what I mean?
Eighth of Canada, Zion.
I was watching Bucks Raptors yesterday. The Raptors won the opening tip, and Siakam got it and then traveled right away. And it made me think, oh, it's that right now.
The last team I want to bring up, this team has been abysmal. The Memphis Grizzlies.
Oh,
$4 for a ticket. Can Ja come back and save this team, or is it just too much?
He's gonna come back and put that team on the course. Like at that point, it's just a matter of can they play well enough.
this is a hole, and I know it's 10 games in or whatever, but 2-9's a hole. But the counterpoint to that is you're 3 back in the play-in,
Mm-hmm.
and that has like the Pelicans in right now, and these teams that are who knows which way they could go. So, what's his suspension? 25.
25, so he's got 15. If they're close, relatively close to 500 at that point, I believe that he can get him to a playing game.
But if they're on this pace, if they're like 5-20,
Yeah, it's a wrap.
that's a wrap. Yeah.
The Wild West never disappoints. It's gonna be a fun ride. We're barely getting started. Between tournament, play-in, playoffs, everything.
I love the play-in tournament. I'm loving it. Aside from those ugly ass courts, the competition is great.
Oh, man. For all the people's fan bases that are gonna hate us for what we said, I already know Sacramento Kings fans. Y'all gonna hate us. But
Yeah, bean.
make sure y'all like, subscribe, drop your comments on if you agree, disagree. We will be reading them, writing back to you. We'll be doing a lot more NBA content. Rep your team down below. Let us know what we got right or wrong. Much love, everybody, all you NBA fans. Enjoy your Thanksgiving feast. We are out of here. Later.
Peace.
How much I'm working for this? I swear my dreams are too important.